Picture this, right? You are lying in bed.
Mm.
It is the middle of the night, just pitch black in your room. And you wake up, maybe you just need a glass of water, or I don't know, you're just shifting around. So you reach out, your hand finds the cold metal edge of your smartphone sitting on the nightstand, and you lift it up.
Right, something we all do, like constantly.
Exactly. And in that fraction of a second, I mean, before your brain has even fully registered that you are actually awake, the screen illuminates.
Yeah.
There's this sudden, completely silent flash of infrared light. It's totally invisible to the human eye, but it washes over your face and it maps the invisible contours of your skin, the depth of your eye sockets, the bridge of your nose.
Just reading your geometry.
Right.
Yeah.
And just like that, with literally nothing but a sleepy, half-open glance in the dark, the device unlocks. The little padlock icon just clicks open.
It's so fast you don't even think about it.
You really don't. And suddenly all your emails, your photos, your banking apps, like your entire digital life is instantly accessible. And it feels like magic, doesn't it? Oh, absolutely. It feels so perfectly tailored to you. But what if that exact moment of frictionless convenience, that seamless technological hug we all just completely rely on, is actually the most terrifying security blind spot in our modern lives? Welcome to today's deep dive.
It really is a ritual we all perform, dozens, maybe hundreds of times a day.
Oh, easily hundreds.
And we do it without a single conscious thought. I mean, we have been so conditioned over the last decade to trust that invisible flash of light just implicitly.
Yeah.
We actually trust it way more than we trust a physical key and a physical lock.
Which is exactly why today's source material hit me so hard. We are looking at a highly disturbing video from the YouTube channel The Midnight Curator, and it's titled, "My Phone Unlocked," and I wasn't looking at it.
Yeah, that title alone is just deeply unsettling.
Right. Now, on the surface, this whole thing plays out like a psychological thriller. It's this creepy narrative about a user waking up to find their device unlocking itself in the completely dark bedroom. But our mission today isn't just to tell you a ghost story. We are going to use this specific narrative to really examine the hidden vulnerabilities of biometric security. We're going to explore why our absolute, unquestioning trust in seamless technology might be a massive mistake.
Because while the story itself is framed as fiction, the underlying mechanics are not.
No, they're entirely real. So, okay, let's unpack this. Because the transition from the everyday convenience of tech into this thriller arc is wild.
Well, the reality of those mechanics is what makes the narrative so unnerving to begin with.
Right.
We aren't just looking at a sequence of scary events. We are going to actively dissect the rigid, unyielding mathematical parameters of the hardware itself.
Right.
Because the very architecture that is designed to keep intruders out is exactly what makes this specific type of intrusion possible.
Yeah, we have to strip away the illusion of the magic, right?
Exactly. We have to look at the cold equations underneath it all.
Let's start by dissecting that illusion then. Because there's been this huge shift from effort to ease. We all know the tech industry loves a frictionless user experience.
Oh, frictionless is the ultimate buzzword.
Right. We have completely traded the mental effort of remembering complex alphanumeric passwords for the physical ease of just letting a camera scan our biology.
Which really represents a monumental philosophical shift, in how we approach the entire concept of a lock and a key.
How so? Like philosophically?
Well, think about it. When you use a traditional password, the secret is something you know. It exists entirely within your mind. It's abstract.
Okay, yeah.
But when you use face unlock or a fingerprint scanner, the secret is something you are. And this operates on a very specific, highly rigid assumption. We essentially believe that our biology is a perfectly unique, mathematically unforgeable identifier.
Right, like a snowflake.
Exactly. What's fascinating here is that the core premise of the entire biometric security model relies completely on the idea that no two faces will ever generate the exact same mathematical geometry when they are scanned by these sensors.
Okay, I want to pause on that mechanism for a second, because I think a lot of people, and I used to be one of them, assume the phone is just taking a really high-resolution photo of them and comparing it to another photo saved on the phone.
Yeah, that's a very common misconception.
But that is not what is happening inside the hardware at all, is it?
Not at all. I mean, if it were just comparing flat photographs, the system could be defeated by a glossy printout from a magazine.
Which would be terrible security.
Right. So modern biometric systems actually utilize a secure enclave. It's a dedicated, physically isolated subsystem on the device's main chip.
Okay.
When you first set up Face Unlock, the phone projects a massive matrix of infrared dots onto your face, and it measures how those dots deform over the three-dimensional topography of your physical features.
So it's basically making a 3D mold of you.
Basically, it calculates the exact distance between your pupils, the depth of your jawline, the prominence of your cheekbones, and then it translates that physical geometry into a complex mathematical algorithm, a topological hash, we call
By
it.
hash. Okay.
Yeah, and it discards the actual visual image entirely. It only stores the math.
Wow. So there's no actual picture of me in there?
No. Every single time you unlock the phone, it runs a live scan, generates a brand new mathematical hash, and checks if it perfectly matches the stored equation.
And because this whole process happens in like milliseconds, and because it honestly rarely ever fails us, we fall into this massive psychological trap.
Oh, completely.
We assume that because the technology is so smooth and so fast, it must be intrinsically safe. Like, we anthropomorphize the phone, we look at it, it unlocks, and we think, oh, my phone recognizes me.
Yeah, but it doesn't recognize you like a friend recognizes you across a crowded room.
Exactly, it doesn't recognize you at all. It just recognizes a geometric pattern.
We constantly conflate operational efficiency with structural security. We assume that because the door opens so quickly and smoothly, the lock itself must be incredibly sophisticated.
Right.
And while the measuring tools themselves are sophisticated, the actual evaluation process is profoundly reductive. It is just evaluating a raw data set, nothing more.
Because when a process requires zero effort from you, you just stop thinking about the mechanics of the gate. You never have to stop and actually present your credentials anymore, so you totally forget the gate even exists.
That's spot on.
It makes me think of like a bank vault. Imagine a bank vault with a massive, heavy steel door, 3 feet thick, completely impenetrable. You look at that heavy door and you think, wow, my valuables are incredibly safe in there.
But the thickness of the door only matters if the lock controlling it is actually discerning.
Yes,
Right.
exactly. What if the lock mechanism inside that massive door is completely indifferent to who is actually turning the dial? The door might be incredibly heavy, but if the lock literally does not care whose hand is on the wheel, the weight of the door is totally irrelevant.
Right. And that is what this source material forces us to look at.
It forces us to ask a deeply uncomfortable question. If we trust this automated biometric process entirely, what actually happens when the hardware correctly authenticates the wrong thing?
Because the moment you introduce that possibility, the entire foundation of our personal baseline of security just collapses.
Because you can't undo it.
Exactly. Unlike a compromised password, where you can log in from another device, reset it, and just move on with your day, you cannot reset your face.
No.
You cannot change the fundamental topography of your cheekbones. If the system is somehow tricked into believing that a foreign entity or some synthesized input is your biological baseline, the security model doesn't just fail.
It backfires.
It actively works against you. It authorizes the intruder with the exact same absolute certainty that it usually reserves for you.
Man. Okay, let's bring this directly into the narrative of the video, because this is where the everyday convenience of our tech really starts to twist into something awful.
Yeah, the setup is brilliant.
The source sets the scene at 6:2 in the morning. It's that liminal space, right, between night and day.
Yeah.
The room is completely dark. The user is half asleep in bed.
We've all been there.
Right. The phone is sitting entirely undisturbed on the nightstand. And crucially, the screen is facing away from the user. No one is touching it. No one is looking at it. And then, cutting through the absolute dead silence of the early morning bedroom, there is a distinct, soft click.
Just that one sound.
The sound of the device unlocking itself.
You have to consider the psychological weight of that specific sound, too. I mean, the sound design of our modern lives is deeply, deeply ingrained in our subconscious now.
Oh, for sure.
We know exactly what a lock sound is. We know what a notification vibration feels like in our bones.
Yeah.
Hearing that specific acoustic signature, the unlock chime, when you absolutely have not initiated the action, it creates immediate cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, your brain is like, wait, what?
The brain registers the sound as a confirmation of an action, but your physical body knows it didn't perform the action.
And the source explores the human reaction to that dissonance so beautifully, because the immediate response is always denial. It is the powerful psychology of rationalization. The user hears the click, their heart skips a beat, they grab the phone and they look at it. The screen is glowing. The home screen is fully open, all the apps are accessible, and the user immediately tells themselves a story to make it okay.
Oh yeah, we always do.
They say, oh, I must have bumped it in my sleep. It was an accidental tap. My arm probably brushed the screen. Or, they blame the tech. They say, it's just a weird software glitch. The new operating system update is totally buggy.
They find the most mundane explanation possible.
Yes, because the alternative is just too terrifying to process at 6 in the morning.
Yeah.
So they lock the device, set it back down in the exact same spot, and close their eyes again.
And it is a perfectly natural defense mechanism, honestly. We desperately want our environment to remain predictable.
Right.
When an anomaly occurs, our instinct is to force it into a framework of normalcy. An accidental tap is normal. A weird glitch is normal. But the narrative strips away that comforting rationalization almost immediately.
It doesn't let you keep it.
No, because a few moments later, as the user is just lying there with their eyes closed,
Click. That happens a second time. And this time, the user knows for an absolute fact that they did not move. They didn't twitch. They didn't reach for it. But the room is bathed in that soft glow again. The screen is unlocked. And this forces a massive technical reality check. You cannot rationalize the second click.
you really can't. And from a purely mechanical standpoint, the accidental tap theory is technically impossible anyway.
Why is that?
Let's break down why. Biometric cameras, specifically the complex array of sensors housed in the front of your smartphone, they do not experience accidental screen caps. They are fundamentally passive sensors.
Okay, wait, I want to push back on the word passive here because a lot of people, and honestly myself included until recently, kind of assume the camera's just always rolling in the background. Like it's always watching, always analyzing the room, waiting for a face to suddenly appear.
Right, and that is a very common misconception.
It's not doing that.
No. If the main camera, the infrared projector, and the depth sensors were constantly firing and mapping your room in 3 dimensions 24 hours a day, your battery would be dead in like 45 minutes.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
The processing power required for continuous real-time depth mapping is just immense. Therefore, the system is explicitly designed to sleep. It lies dormant to conserve energy. It only wakes up and begins the complex process of scanning when it receives a highly specific, predetermined trigger.
Okay, so what exactly are those triggers?
Usually it's the internal accelerometer detecting that the phone has been physically lifted off a surface, or the capacitive touchscreen registering an intentional physical tap from a finger. The hardware essentially registers, okay, I have been moved or touched, therefore a user is likely present. I will now open the optical array and look for the face.
Okay, but in the story, the phone is sitting perfectly still on the nightstand. The accelerometer definitely hasn't triggered. Nobody tapped the glass. Yet the phone unlocked. Twice. How is that mechanically possible?
Well, that leads to a horrifying implication regarding the architecture of the device.
Yeah.
For that hardware to fire the unlock sequence twice while completely stationary and entirely untouched, it means the sensor array was engaged by something else.
Something else, like what?
Beyond the accelerometer, modern phones use ambient light sensors and low-power proximity sensors that do run constantly in the background.
Oh, okay.
If those low-power sensors actively detect something blocking the ambient light or something moving directly into its immediate field of view, it can force the main biometric camera to wake up. So the device didn't accidentally go off. It actively detected something hovering right over it.
Oh my God. It felt a presence.
Yes.
It recognized that an entity literally moved into its proximity, triggered the wake-up sequence, and then whatever it saw in the dark, it accepted as the absolute mathematical truth.
Exactly. And the pacing of the source material shifts dramatically at this realization. It moves us from the sort of sleepy ambiguity of the early morning into the absolute deepest part of the night.
Part 3, the 2:41 a.m. intrusion. It's a completely different night now. The user wakes up in the dark. And there is absolutely no physical reason for it. There's no loud noise outside, no alarm going off, just that sudden, pure, instinctual wakefulness where your eyes just snap open and your adrenaline spikes.
The worst kind of waking up.
The worst. The room is perfectly still. But this time, the physical geometry of the scene has completely changed. The user is lying completely still, facing the opposite direction. Their back is entirely turned to the nightstand. They are staring at the blank wall on the far side of the bed.
And this positioning is critical for the narrative tension, but also for the technical proof.
Right.
It establishes a literal blind spot for the user, but a clear, unobstructed line of sight for the device sitting on the nightstand.
The room is dead silent. And then, originating from the nightstand behind their back, comes that sound. Click. The phone unlocks. The screen illuminates. casting this sharp, elongated shadow of the user's own body against the wall they are facing. The glow is totally undeniable, and the terror here is that this moment provides absolute horrifying proof of independence.
Yes. The camera triggered, the authentication process ran its incredibly complex calculations, and the lock opened. This definitively proves that whatever biometric data is being fed into that sensor, it is happening completely independent of the user's actual face.
Because they're facing the wall.
Exactly. The system is authenticating something else entirely that happens to possess the correct mathematical keys.
And the fear hits so hard it literally causes physical paralysis. You lie there perfectly still, trapped in your own body, terrified to move a single muscle. You're just listening to the suffocating silence. And that is when you hear the secondary sound. It's incredibly soft, barely even there. But it is unmistakable. The slow, rhythmic sound of breathing. And it is originating right next to the illuminated device on your nightstand.
Okay, if we connect this to the bigger picture, we need to pause here and deconstruct the mechanics of what is actually happening within the device at that exact moment. Because the terror isn't just that there's an intruder in the room with you.
Right.
The profound terror is that the intruder is successfully navigating one of the most complex security protocols ever engineered by humans, which is liveness detection.
Okay, let's break down liveness detection, because this is the crux of why this scenario is so technically chilling. It's not just a matter of tricking a dumb lens. The phone is actively demanding proof of life.
Right. In the early days of facial recognition, the systems were incredibly rudimentary. They essentially just took a two-dimensional snapshot and compared it to another two-dimensional snapshot.
Like a regular camera.
Exactly. And the vulnerability there was glaringly obvious.
Yeah.
Anyone could bypass your security simply by holding up a high-quality photograph of your face right in front of the lens. The system saw the correct geometry in the flat photo, and it unlocked.
Which is why we don't use that anymore.
Right. To counter this, security engineers developed liveness detection. This is now a mandatory, completely non-negotiable layer of modern biometric security that is engineered specifically to stop flat spoofing attacks. It demands empirical proof that the object it is scanning is a living, breathing, three-dimensional entity.
But wait, if it's pitch black in the bedroom, how does the camera see anything at all? Standard optical lenses are completely useless without ambient light.
No.
How does it know the chest is moving or if the object actually has depth?
Because it abandons visible light entirely. The process relies on an active infrared projection system.
Okay.
First, the device fires an invisible infrared grid onto the subject. We are talking about an array of 30,000 microscopic dots of infrared light blasted out from a vertical cavity surface-emitting laser. The sensor then reads the deformation of those dots. If the dots hit a flat surface, like a printed photograph or an iPad screen displaying your face, the grid remains relatively uniform, and the system instantly flags it as a spoof and denies access.
It requires physical depth.
Yes. It measures the specific distance from the tip of the nose to the sensor versus the distance from the deepest part of the eye socket to the sensor. It builds a real-time, millimeter-accurate topographical map to fully confirm a three-dimensional mass.
Okay, so parameter number 1, it must be a 3D physical object with measurable depth. But what about the breathing part? You mentioned earlier that a plaster cast of a face wouldn't work either.
Right, and that brings us to parameter number 2, which is temporal variance or micro-movement.
Micro-movements.
Yes. Even when a human being tries to hold perfectly still, they cannot. Blood is pumping, muscles are microscopically twitching, and most importantly, the chest and head are moving slightly with every single inhalation and exhalation. Advanced liveness detection algorithms actively search for these minute physical shifts. They analyze sequential frames of the infrared scan to confirm dynamic changes over a fraction of a second. It literally needs to see the subtle rhythm of organic life. Wow. So if the 3D mass is perfectly rigid, like a highly detailed silicone mask or a mannequin head, the algorithm recognizes the lack of organic variance and denies access.
So it needs to see the subtle rhythm of life. And the user, who is lying paralyzed in bed, just heard breathing coming from right next to the phone. The entity has depth, and it has temporal variance. Is there anything else the sensor demands before it unlocks?
Yes. Parameter number 3 is focal proximity. The optical physics of these microscopic lenses require the subject to be within a very specific range. You simply cannot scan a face from across the room.
Right.
The subject must physically hover within a precise, optimal distance radius, usually between 10 and 20 inches from the screen, for the infrared dots to properly resolve, and for the depth map to be accurately calculated.
Here's where it gets really interesting and also just absolute nightmare fuel. When you lay out those rigid parameters, the three-dimensional depth, the organic micro-movements of breathing, the precise physical proximity required to trigger the optical array, you realize this horrific irony.
Hmm.
Whatever is standing in the dark next to the bed isn't bypassing the security by hacking the software or injecting some malicious code. It is successfully satisfying every single one of those mechanical requirements.
Exactly.
It is a physical mass, it possesses a subtle breathing movement, and it is leaning down, physically hovering directly over the nightstand, placing itself into the perfect optimal proximity to force the camera weight.
It is a profound subversion of the technology's intent. The very protocols that were designed by brilliant engineers to guarantee that the user is a living human being are being perfectly fulfilled by an entity that is simply mimicking those exact physical characteristics. The hardware demands proof of life, and the entity in the dark provides it.
This shifts our focus so drastically from the human terror happening in the bed to the cold, automated perspective of the phone's sensors. Because we have to remember, the phone doesn't experience fear.
No, not at all.
It doesn't know what a monster is. It has absolutely no understanding of context, danger, or the sanctity of your bedroom at 10 a.m.
This is the absolute apathy of hardware. A machine does not possess intuition. It cannot sense malicious intent. It is simply a collection of logic gates and sensors that are programmed to execute a specific sequence of actions when presented with specific stimuli.
Right.
When the entity leans over the phone, the proximity sensor is tripped. The logic gate simply says, object is within range, initiate wake sequence. The screen illuminates. The infrared projector fires its 30,000 dots. The logic gate asks, is the object three-dimensional? The sensor reads the depth map and says yes. The logic gate asks, is there temporal variance indicating life? The sensor registers the subtle movement of breathing and says yes.
It just responds to correct physical inputs with entirely cold automation. It is completely blind to context.
Think of it like a rigidly bureaucratic guard standing at a gate to a secure facility.
Okay, I like this. Let's say this guard has a clipboard, and their absolute only instruction from management is to make sure that anyone entering has the correct security form, filled out in blue ink, signed in triplicate.
Yes, and the guard is completely incapable of looking at anything other than the clipboard. Now imagine a horrifying 10-foot-tall monster covered in scales walks up to the gate.
The guard doesn't scream, the guard doesn't draw a weapon or sound an alarm. The guard just looks at the monster, looks down at the clipboard, and says, do you have the form?
Exactly.
And the monster hands over the perfectly formatted paperwork, signed in blue ink, in triplicate.
And the guard simply shrugs, opens the heavy gate, and says, go right on in. The guard ignores the context of the situation entirely because the monsters successfully satisfy the rigid bureaucratic rules of the checkpoint.
Wow.
The system is performing flawlessly according to its design. It is functioning exactly as the engineers intended it to.
So the failure is not in the hardware's ability to measure data. The failure is in our deeply flawed assumption that measuring data is the exact same thing as verifying truth.
Perfectly said.
The entity is basically stepping into the biometric footprint that the user naturally leaves behind. It knows the exact shape of the keyhole, and it is simply molding itself to fit perfectly inside it.
And this clash between human context and machine automation really sets the stage for the climax of the source material's narrative.
Right.
So the user is still completely frozen in bed, still facing the blank wall. The phone is behind them, glowing brightly. The entity is breathing.
And then the tension just escalates dramatically. The phone vibrates with a new notification, a text message, an email, an alert, whatever it is. And because of that sudden notification, the screen lights up even brighter.
And that sudden surge in luminosity changes the entire optical dynamics of the room. The dark glass of the screen is now bright enough to act as a mirror against the dark backdrop of the bedroom.
So from the corner of their eye, without turning their head at all, without making a single sound, the user can see the reflection on the glass of the phone. They can literally see the live feed of their own dark bedroom reflected against the wall.
It's chilling.
And because they are paralyzed by pure fear, they are forced to watch. They see the reflection of their own back lying perfectly still under the covers. And right behind them, occupying the exact physical space above the nightstand where their face should be, is a shape. A dark mass, leaning directly toward the lens of the camera.
It forces the user into the role of a completely passive observer of their own digital violation.
Yeah.
They are awake, fully conscious, but entirely incapacitated, just watching a machine silently study a predator.
And on that screen, you can see the algorithm actively at work. The viewfinder graphic, that little square or circle that pops up when your phone is trying to find your face, it's fully visible in the reflection. It is mimicking exactly what the hidden processes are doing inside the chip. The camera is actively zooming, it's shifting focus. The little graphic is pulsing, methodically expanding and contracting as it attempts to map the features of this dark mass. The machine is actively trying to make sense of what it's looking at. It's running the math in real time.
And that pulsing, focusing camera highlights the intense computational effort required in that moment.
Yeah.
The machine is attempting to reconcile the anomalous physical data it is receiving right now with the pristine, stored mathematical model of the user's face in its secure enclave.
Right.
It is searching for the required geometry.
Right.
It is scanning the dark mass for the exact correct distance between the eyes, the precise angle of the jawline, the specific topography of the cheekbones. It is a silent, desperate calculation happening in fractions of a second, but to the paralyzed user, it feels like an absolute eternity.
You are watching this silent dialogue between the machine and the monster, and you are just praying that the machine is smart enough to realize that this thing is not you. You are praying for the red access denied message. You want the phone to fail so badly.
Of course.
But then the automated process reaches its terrifying conclusion. The phone vibrates one last time, and a system message appears in plain text at the very top of the screen. Face recognized. Welcome back.
Welcome back. I mean, those two words completely shatter the illusion of security. The machine has finished its calculations, it has weighed the evidence, it has measured the geometry, and it has made a definitive, mathematically backed decision. It has officially authorized the dark shape as the primary user.
And the detail that honestly makes my blood run cold is that the screen doesn't show the user's name. It doesn't say, "Welcome back, John," or "Welcome back, Sarah." It just says, "Welcome back."
Yeah.
The machine isn't talking to the user anymore. It is talking directly to the entity. It has completely accepted this mass as the new truth. The original user has been digitally erased and replaced in that exact moment.
It is the ultimate betrayal by the technology we trust the most. We expect these devices to be the infallible gatekeepers of our identities, and in this specific scenario, the gatekeeper has just handed the keys over to an unknown intruder with polite, completely automated efficiency.
But the narrative delivers one final visual twist. On the live feed, in the reflection of the glass, the dark shape begins to actually change. The indistinct, shadowy features of the mass leaning over the table begin to morph. They subtly adjust, they shift, and restructure themselves until they look exactly like the user.
And this visual transformation serves as a profound metaphor for the core vulnerability of all biometric data. The entity didn't just fool the camera, it became the data.
Wow.
It adapted its physical form to precisely match the exact mathematical coordinates the machine was relentlessly demanding.
Okay, let's synthesize all of these takeaways because the implications here go way, way beyond a scary internet video. This raises incredibly important questions about how we fundamentally define identity in the modern age. When our entire security architecture relies entirely on physical traits, the shape of a face, the pattern of an iris, the microscopic ridges of a fingerprint, we are inherently reducing human identity to a mere set of data points.
This raises an important question, right? We are converting actual personhood into a string of numbers. And while that string of numbers is undeniably complex, it is not magical, it is just math. And math, given enough time or the right inputs, can always be solved.
It leaves our biological identity completely exposed. I mean, if your face is just a topographical map, then your security is vulnerable to anyone or anything that can simply replicate that map. If someone steals your banking password, you log in from a secure computer and change the password. It's an enormous inconvenience, sure, but it's fixable. But if an entity, or a malicious actor, or some advanced piece of technology can successfully mimic the exact coordinates of your physical face, what do? You literally can't issue yourself a new face. Your ultimate security key has been permanently compromised.
This is the ultimate blind spot of biometric security.
Yeah.
The hardware is fundamentally blind to context. A camera cannot verify the human truth behind the lens.
Right.
It doesn't know if the geometry it is scanning belongs to the real person who bought the phone, or a sophisticated silicone mask, or a deepfake projection, or, in the context of our source material, a predatory entity morphing its shape in the dark.
Yeah.
The device will not protect us from what stands in the dark because it literally cannot comprehend the concept of the dark. Its only function is to process the raw data presented to it, and, if the math aligns perfectly, welcome the input.
I really want to dive into the ethical implications for everyday users who are relying on biometric unlocking, because we're essentially being coerced into relying on this
Well,
tech.
completely coerced.
Every new smartphone, every new laptop pushes it as the default standard. Set up Face ID, enable Windows, hello. It's marketed to us as the absolute pinnacle of luxury and security. But what happens when the average person realizes that this frictionless tech is actually a massive privacy threat?
Well, the average person experiences a profound sense of technological whiplash. Consumers are explicitly told these systems are military-grade, unbreakable, the absolute zenith of personal security. Yet simultaneously, we see evolving technology rapidly increasing the real-world risks of identity spoofing.
Yeah.
Malicious actors aren't necessarily sending supernatural monsters into your bedroom. They're utilizing entirely terrestrial technology. They are scraping your high-resolution images from your public social media feeds. They are using artificial intelligence to generate perfect three-dimensional models of your face based entirely on those public photos.
Let's speculate on that future for a second, because the trajectory of synthetic media is terrifying. Right now, in this story, we're talking about a dark mass mimicking coordinates in a bedroom. But in 3 to 5 years, what happens when synthetic media, deepfakes, and AI-generated video become so flawlessly advanced that they can effortlessly spoof the temporal variants we talked about earlier?
It's coming.
What happens when a screen can just project a 3D model that breathes, blinks, and perfectly mimics the exact micro-movements required to beat liveness detection?
That is precisely the arms race we are currently engaged in right now between security engineers and malicious actors. As synthetic media becomes mathematically indistinguishable from actual human biology, the hardware sensors will have to become increasingly invasive just to tell the difference.
Invasive how?
Well, to prove you are a living human and not a highly advanced AI simulation, future biometric standards might have to literally measure subcutaneous blood flow using specialized optical sensors.
You're kidding.
No, they might need to track pupillary dilation patterns or analyze the unique acoustic signature of your specific heartbeat, or even measure electrical brain activity just to unlock a phone.
Which opens up a whole Pandora's box of ethical nightmares regarding data collection. I mean, how much of our fundamental biological rhythm are we willing to surrender to a massive tech corporation just to unlock a device 2 seconds faster?
Okay.
If malicious actors gain access to that level of advanced biometric data, not just the shape of your face, but the unique electrical pattern of your literal heart, the potential for exploitation is catastrophic. You aren't just losing access to your email anymore, you are losing ownership of your biological signature.
It creates a scenario where the ultimate cure for biometric vulnerability might actually require the complete eradication of personal privacy.
Hmm.
To give a machine true context for human security, you must give it omnipresent surveillance capabilities.
Wow.
Imagine an AI that could detect elevated heart rates in the room, or recognize the acoustic signature of a break-in, or understand that an unlock request at 2:41 a.m. from an unknown physical mass is a dangerous anomaly that requires a secondary password challenge.
While that sounds technologically fascinating, it basically means trading the blind bureaucratic guard at the gate for an omniscient algorithmic warden that constantly monitors your emotional state and vital signs.
Yes.
It honestly makes you long for the days of just typing in a 4-digit PIN code.
Which brings up an incredibly important practical point for our listeners today. How do we actually protect ourselves against this right now? If the sensors are entirely passive and completely blind to context, what practical advice can we offer to users who want to immediately improve their device security settings?
Well, the most immediate step is to deliberately disrupt the frictionless illusion. Reintroduce friction into your security model. Most modern smartphones allow you to disable biometric unlock entirely.
Yes, they do.
Go back to a complex alphanumeric passcode. Yes, it takes a few seconds longer to unlock your phone, but a passcode exists entirely in your mind, not on your face. A passive sensor cannot be magically tricked into guessing a thought.
But for those who absolutely refuse to give up the convenience of face unlock, there are secondary layers of authentication you must enable. Many devices have a setting buried deep in the accessibility menus called Require Attention.
What does that do?
This setting explicitly forces the camera to verify that your eyes are not only open, but actively looking directly at the lens before it unlocks. It adds a crucial layer of active participation to an otherwise entirely passive process.
Wait, does require attention actually solve the problem in the story we just talked about? Because if the user is paralyzed, staring at the wall, the phone wouldn't unlock, right?
In theory, yes. It ensures the device won't unlock if you're fast asleep or if you are looking away in complete terror. However, as we just discussed regarding synthetic media, an entity or an AI capable of morphing its geometry could easily synthesize the appearance of open, attentive eyes.
Mm.
It is a hurdle, not a wall.
Which means we really need to compartmentalize our security. Let's say you use biometrics to unlock the lock screen of the device itself just for everyday convenience. That's fine. But you must require a physical PIN or a master password to open your banking apps, your email, or your password manager.
Absolutely.
Do not let one single biological scan grant unfettered access to your entire digital life. You must build bulkheads in your security ship.
Compartmentalization is truly the only rational defense against a system that can be mathematically spoofed. We must stop treating biometric data as an absolute, undeniable truth and start treating it as merely one piece of a much broader security puzzle.
So bringing it all back together, so what does this all mean? We started by talking about the magic of that little infrared flash in the dark, the comfort of our technology seamlessly opening the door for us.
Yeah.
But when we strip away the convenience and actually look at the cold equations, we see a much harsher reality. While we view our biometrics as incredibly unique and absolutely foolproof to a machine, you are not a person. You are not a soul. You are just a math equation waiting to be solved by whatever leans into the frame.
Just math.
The sensors do not care if it's you or a high-resolution photograph or a sophisticated deepfake or a morphing entity in the dead of night. If the math checks out, the door opens.
It is a totally sobering realization that our absolute trust in this technology is often entirely misplaced. Not because the technology is broken, but because it is performing its rigid automated task with terrifying perfection.
So the next time you wake up in the pitch black and you reach for your phone and it illuminates your face without you having to press a single button, I want you to think about those cold, unfeeling sensors calculating your geometry. Think about what they're actually looking for and what they're completely failing to see.
Because if a smartphone machine cannot tell the difference between you and a dark shape mimicking your coordinates to unlock your private data, what happens when we inevitably trust these exact same blind passive sensors to unlock the front doors of our homes?
Wow. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. Stay curious, stay vigilant, and maybe, just maybe, keep your phone face down tonight.